Welcome, my little droogies, to the DJP. It's me, your humble narrator and host, Justin from Florida. Okay, so I'm not going to ramble too much because it's finals week next week and I still have a few papers to write and a multimodal presentation to construct and a lot of studying to do. But then I get a much needed break for a few weeks. And so all of that energy that I put into educating and articulating myself can be put back into, like making podcasts and writing music and doing nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean nothing. The Tao tells us that we do more by doing less. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Less. And, I really love having the time to just slow down for a minute. And I'm going to use some of this break as kind of a retreat time and do a lot of meditation and, introspection. And, if you're a fan of this show, you know that meditation and the Dharma are a huge part of my life and a big part of this podcast, really. And today's guest is a prime example of just that. Dr. William Jackson has spent the last 15 years practicing and studying mindfulness-based meditation and psychotherapy. His teaching style incorporates core methods from Vietnamese Zen, Burmese Theravada, and contemporary evidence-based mindfulness practices. William intensively studied several different Buddhist traditions with over 7,000 hours of total time and retreat during his 6 years as a fully ordained Buddhist monk. He's also a clinically trained psychologist and has researched and created mindfulness-based interventions with the National Institute of Health, the Benson Henry Institute of Mind-Body Medicine at MGH, Tufts University, the Center of Mindfulness and Compassion, and Harvard Medical School. William is currently the founder and CEO of SkillfulMeans, which is an organization that develops mindfulness-based programs that help students, parents, athletes, and health-conscious individuals clarify and achieve their personal picture of well-being. So we talked a lot about meditation. We talked about his time as a monk, which was super fascinating. He's got some really great stories, and I can't wait for you to hear them. And you don't have to. So without further ado, Dr. William Jackson.
Catch yourself sliding in and out of a hallucinatory state. Just relax and enjoy it. Just relax and enjoy it.
This is an experiment in mind formation. Forming, controlling, operating your mind and your brain. Using digital techniques to overload, scramble, confuse, unfocus your mind. The natural state of the brain is chaos. Chaos is beautiful.
William Jackson, welcome to the Dharma Junkie podcast, man. How are you doing?
Thanks, doing well.
Good. Glad to hear it.
Doing well.
Just wrangling kids this morning, huh?
Yes.
Yeah,
indeed.
That's fun.
The lay life.
Yeah, householder life.
Right.
Yeah, that's funny. That's so tell us a little bit about yourself, man. Tell me about yourself. Like, just what's your story?
So I'm a psychologist. I'm a clinical health psychologist currently, and a former Buddhist monk. I spent about 6 years as a monastic in a few different traditions. One is the Vietnamese Zen, and then I studied in the Theravada Buddhist traditions. And then, as a monastic, sort of got teachings all around from different teachers. Thich Nhat Hanh, Pauk Sayadaw, Ajahn Brahm. We sort of did the rounds at the time when I was a monastic.
Right.
And then, at one point in retreat, just sort of realizing I wanted to come back. I wanted to have the experience as a human being of having a family, and decided to come back, go to school, learn how to translate a lot of the stuff that I had learned being a monastic into something usable for my livelihood and something that I could share with other people in a language they could understand. And and then, started a company, and the rest is history.
Right. So, how old were you when you got into, like, when you took your vows as a monk?
Yeah, I was 22.
That's pretty young.
Yeah.
Or pretty old, really. Considering where you're at, anyway.
Yeah, I didn't have a tremendous life experience yet of taking care of myself. That's for sure.
Right.
And, I was much more on my own than I thought I was going to be.
So what led you to that decision at that age? I mean, like, well, what was the linchpin that, you know, what was it that you were like, did you wake up one day? You were just like, I think I want to be a Buddhist monk. Like, it doesn't seem like many people just kind of wake up and just go, hey, I'm going to give up all my freedoms pretty much and just go meditate for, 14 hours a day.
Yeah. Well, no, when I was in high school, I was always interested in meditation. My sister sort of got me into meditation when I was younger, and when I graduated from high school and went to college, I ended up going to a performing arts college because that was sort of the one thing I had going for me in high school. I kind of got in a bit of trouble here and there in high school. I was never sort of mean, but I was experimenting with all sorts of different, pot and mushrooms and, all that
states
sort of
of
stuff.
consciousness.
Yeah, I was interested in energy and, meditation, and that was just sort of my thing. And,
Right.
But that sort of got me in trouble. I wasn't doing it necessarily in a healthy way.
Mm.
And then when I got to college, I was studying Shakespeare in England, and I had a lot of time on my hands. We were living in a Christian missionary in Birmingham, England,
Okay.
and studying Shakespeare. And I had hours. I was just memorizing lines, and I found a book by the Dalai Lama called How to Practice, The Way to a Meaningful Life.
Mm.
And started reading through that. And, he said a couple of things like, enlightenment is when what is good for you and other people and what you want to do become the same thing.
Mm.
And I thought, that sounds pretty cool, because I really didn't have that much experience with Buddhism at that point.
Right.
And then he also said, if you meditate 30 minutes a day for 3 months in a row, you can develop calm abiding. And I thought, that sounds cool. So I had time on my hands, and I started meditating, and I started having, some magical experiences and some pretty down to earth experiences of understanding my emotions and other people's emotions and how my mind was working, and started sharing that with other people. And I think in high school, I'd really developed a negative view of myself just because I got in trouble a lot.
Mm.
And when I had something really valuable, sort of wholesome to share with other people, people looked at me differently. And that sort of hooked me to keep practicing meditation, along with all like the, seeing lights and like having these profound experiences, and, that hooked me to meditation. And when I got back to school in the States, there was a monk at my school, and, through some, I had a friend ask him, well, what's the last thing that happens before you reach enlightenment? And because my friend wanted me to go meet with him and listen to his Dharma talk, and I really wasn't interested at that point. Mm. And he came back with like this personal response that was like directly related to my, some realizations I'd had about myself. And I was like, whoa, is this guy like reading my mind? So I went to visit him, and, went to a couple of his retreats, and eventually asked him if I could go to his monastery. And he said, no, you can't become a monk that easy. And I said, no, you misunderstand. It's like through a translator. I just want to practice meditation. He said, okay, you can come to my monastery, which I expected to be like, I was a teenager basically at that point. I expected it to be this like beautiful forest retreat center, and I show up and it's like an old dilapidated print factory on the side of the road in Germany.
Right.
But I learned how to practice there. That's where I started practicing meditation until I understood, a little bit more about, some solid retreat centers and teachers. And then, I just kept practicing. I kept feeling better about myself, and it just drove me to practice more and more, and started meeting some really interesting teachers. And I started changing for the better, and it just hooked me.
Yeah. Yeah. Different timeline, but very much my experience. It's like when you find that, it's like you're always looking for that thing, and you don't know what that thing is. And then when you find meditation, and just, the Dharma. Yeah, that's what it was for me, at least. It was like, oh man, all right, there's that missing piece that I've been looking for. Cause, I did the same thing. A lot of drug experimentation when I was younger and when I was older, when I was much older too. Interestingly enough, I actually came to the Dharma in jail, for a drug charge. That was like 7 years ago. I mean, I had always been very interested in, Eastern philosophy and Eastern religions just all throughout my life, but I didn't really start really paying attention to it until, I was almost forced to do it.
Right.
Well, not forced, but it was like, okay, well, I can either do this or I can torture myself the entire time I'm in here. So,
right.
Right.
So there's like a teacher in there?
No. Interesting story, actually. I was looking for a book. I was at like a work camp, right? Legal slavery, basically. So I'm at this work camp and we're not working that day I think it might have been raining or something. And I was just looking for a book to read, and they had some bookshelves in there. And there's a book in there by Bo Lozoff called Free on the Inside. He was one of Ram Dass's followers.
Right.
So Neem Karoli Baba and Ram Dass. Right. And so I read that, and it gave, some basic meditation instructions and a few yoga asanas and it was just treat this time while you're incarcerated like it's your monastery, treat it like your ashram.
I know.
And I was
for a lot of people, for a lot of, contemplatives, it's not a bad rap. It's not a bad situation.
Right. Exactly. I was like, all right, well, this seems like a way to turn this negative situation into a positive situation and at least make the best of it while I'm here. Yeah. And so that's what I did. I started meditating and gained a little bit of peace while I was there, because I could just kind of go.
How much could you meditate a day while you were there?
At that point, I mean, it's jail. It's crazy in there. I know it's very loud, but that's no obstruction to meditation really. Whenever I found the time, I was probably meditating for, it was in spurts because I wasn't very good at sitting then, but, I'd do 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there,
right.
And, it would just accrue over time. And then when I got out, I still was meditating, very infrequently though, because, it's not the best rehabilitation center. So I still, when I got out, I basically went right back to, doing a bunch of stupid crap that I shouldn't have been doing.
Right.
And, story goes on and on. Anyway,
when I
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, when I first got to the monastery, one of the reasons that I went, I actually had I was auditioning my senior year of college. I was auditioning in New York and Los Angeles for agents, managers, that sort of thing. Mm. And I landed a manager in Los Angeles, which was pretty sweet. She was like the manager for some other well-known people. Mm. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I'd gone out the night before, drinking, and I was totally hungover and just hadn't been taking care of myself. And I walk into this it's like another audition, but it's this beautiful office. Some people are coming to me with tea, it's I had no idea what I was doing.
Right.
And she basically offered me to be my manager. And, she asked me to show her something. And I didn't feel comfortable because I was totally hungover and I felt like I looked like an idiot. And she just thought I was playing games with her. And I had said, she's like, oh, what were you doing? You've been meeting with other people. And I said, oh no, I just met with a friend over at this studio, which is a place where there's also managers. Mm. And so she thought I was playing games with her and being really smart and tricky. But I was just fumbling around. And when I got out of that meeting, I just realized this was a huge opportunity.
Right.
And although she said I'm going to send your headshot to a bunch of different people, I was supposed to audition for Clint Eastwood, TV series or movie or whatever. No. I just wasn't ready. Yeah. I was a disaster, internally. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to go for 3 months on this meditation retreat. I'm going to clean myself up. I'm going to get my head straight. And then I'm going to go back and start acting again.
Right.
And 3 months turned to 5 months. And then after 5 months, I shaved my head and put on a robe.
Yeah, that's definitely a different path. Definitely a different path from being an actor.
Yeah.
So, well, you said you kind of studied under Zen and the Theravadan traditions.
Yeah. So I started with a Vietnamese Zen tradition. My teacher studied with Thich Nhat Hanh and a bunch of other like more Chinese Zen teachers.
That's interesting. Who was your teacher?
My first teacher, his name was Thich Thien Son.
Okay.
And actually, after staying there for a while, I realized that he was engaging in some activities that I didn't approve of. And I was new to Buddhism. I didn't know what it was. And so I didn't realize that he, the way that he had arranged things was a little bit unsavory,
right?
Like self-serving in a way. And the community was like really depending on him. He wasn't really encouraging people to like find their own voice, even though he like encouraged you to get different perspectives and to learn from different teachers. And he gave you practices to start doing. It was still, when I finally went to go practice with Pa Ok Monastery in Myanmar, because one of the other teachers there suggested I go. I got a taste of like, oh, this is the legit practice.
Right. Yeah.
And then I came back and I saw what the Zen master was doing. And I was like, nah, like this is about him. And this is his perspective of things. It is not really, a deeper practice.
Right. Yeah.
So like he was really good at saying, hey, we need to apply these meditations in our day to day and we need to work on stuff. But he was like playing. Rather than really taking people's lives seriously, he would toy with people, and he did it under like the Zen master guise, but it really wasn't wholesome. He was just playing. It was like a big child who had a lot of power, and people were getting hurt. And so eventually, I worked with. We had invited the Dalai Lama a couple of years before that, or like a year before I decided to leave. And we had an event with like 10,000 people at the Commerzbank Arena in Frankfurt, Germany. It was like this big sort of event, which was amazing. And with all these teachers coming from all over the world, and the Dalai Lama's like retinue like came and stayed with us. And it was just this incredible experience. But right after that, I decided that I was going to head out because I had realized sort of that it was about fame for him. It was about him sort of just expanding and sort of being ambitious rather than it being a more wholesome sort of environment.
Right.
We had Ajahn Brahm. We also had invited Ajahn Brahm to come and visit, and he gave us this sort of talk to our Sangha, and he said, do you think that you are here for the monastery, or is the monastery here?
So you were saying we got cut off. So we're picking back up.
Yeah. So this is a time of like high tension in the monastery. So we had, when I first ordained, I was the first sort of white monk to ordain under this teacher. So my first teacher, his name was, Thich Thien Son. And I didn't know much about Buddhism at that time, but he was a very charismatic guy. The monastery was growing quickly. He also did like acupuncture and massage in the clinic. There was a bunch of massage people, and like people swore by his acupuncture, like cured people of all these diseases. And I was like really, just swept up by this guy. He was like so charismatic.
Yeah.
And seemingly really insightful.
Right.
But, things that were going on behind the scenes is, he was sleeping with people, he was sleeping with some of his students. And what I didn't know at the time is before I became a monk, I went through this period where, probably because I was smoking a ton of pot and doing other things, I had anxiety disorder, I'm sure, and some depression. And when I met him, I had this sort of paranoia about maybe about my sexuality. And I had this moment with him at one of the retreats where he said, "Oh, you're worried about if you're gay or not gay? Like, well, just try it. Go ahead. I'm not sexually interested in anything. Why don't you try to kiss me and see what happens?"
Oh, weird.
Yeah. But I had no idea. And I was like, okay, like this guy is going to keep this secret, and this monk, he's obviously not interested in anything. So why don't I try it? So, but later on, I figure out like he's doing this with all sorts of people.
Wow.
Behind the scenes.
Wow.
So we had just invited the Dalai Lama. There's thousands of people. We have like the German government. People they want to put him up as to be the head of the German Sangha Buddhist Union.
Oh, wow.
And I just realized what's happening. So I work with the Dalai Lama and some of his people to like write a letter to send out to all the different monasteries. I confronted the Zen master and said, like, look, I know what you're doing. This is not okay. I realize this is not Buddhism. And he sort of crumbled. Like all of a sudden he just like switched from this, like, I'm this austere Zen master and I know everything and I'm enlightened, to like, I'm just a man, like, don't tell anybody. And I was like, oh no, like, what have I been doing? I gave up my life, being an actor to come follow this guy. Like, what did I do? But, ultimately I met in the process, after this sort of happened, I started inviting all these different monks to our monastery. So I invited Ajahn Brahm. We invited, Sakya Trinzin, the head of the, Sakya lineage. We had the Dalai Lama come. We had, not Pema, we had Thubten Chodron, we had Tenzin Palmo, we had all these like well-known teachers. We invited them and offered them a retreat, and I helped to organize all these retreats because I wanted to educate our Sangha on what Buddhism really was.
Right, yeah.
See if we could sort of push this guy out. But what I realized after a pretty short time of trying to do that is, the whole monastery revolved around this guy.
Yeah.
And then finally I was like, okay, I have to tell everybody what's going on. So I told everybody in the monastery, and then I left and nobody left.
Wow. That's crazy.
Everybody stayed. It was insane. Until like a year later when somebody like got a video of him doing something. And they took it to Thich Nhat Hanh, and they took the whole Sangha to Thich Nhat Hanh's Sangha because like, who else would this guy report to? Like, who's going to come in and say,
yeah,
what you're doing is not good. So they took him to the, this is after I had left and I had gone back to school, and I tried to do what I could, like letting everybody know, sending a letter to all these different monasteries. But they took him to Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh basically said, you have to disrobe. And so he took off his brown robe and he put on a white one and just became a spiritual teacher and just kept doing the same thing.
Yeah, that seems to be the way it goes.
It's like there was no accountability. So
that's crazy, man.
And then I was interviewed by like Der Bilder, which is like basically the New York Times of Germany, and we like wrote a big article on what had happened, and there was a bunch of us who got together and whatever. But like, that was like one piece of my experience. I then continued practicing in the Theravada tradition. I went to go live with Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery, Thich Nhat Hanh's Sangha. We went to Plum Village, and then upstate New York at Blue Cliff Monastery. I lived with them for a while, and then I decided I wanted to go back to school for psychology. And part of me, because in the psychotherapeutic field, I'm sure there's all sorts of stuff that happens, but they're like laws. There's much more clearly delineated laws and relationships, and it's much more out in the open in that sense. But also because I wanted to share what I had learned in like deep retreat and what I had learned, with Thich Nhat Hanh Sangha, and with psychotherapy, I wanted to blend that into something that was really meaningful. And that's sort of the company that we've built now, that really helps people to clarify their picture of well-being using meditation. Ultimately, because where I saw things go wrong in the monastery with my first teacher, and, sometimes with therapy, is when somebody else starts defining for you what your well-being is, that's when things go wrong.
Right.
Rather than, encouraging you to figure that out for yourself and supporting you in that direction. So that's always been a passion of mine because I've been burned before.
Yeah, I can imagine so. So you lived at Plum Village for a while? That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, a little bit. Just a couple of short stints there, visiting for several weeks or, a month at a time.
Yeah. Like I said, I think we know some of the same people. Claude Anchin Thomas, I had mentioned. He lived at Plum Village for a while. I sit with him as much as I can, as many times as I can get over there a month. I try to sit. There's an open meditation twice a week, so I try to go over there and do that. Mostly, I'm also of the Theravada tradition. Mostly, if I had to pick a lineage, that would be the way I kind of fall. I've actually been studying under what used to be Against the Stream. It's a Wild Heart Meditation Center in Nashville now, and those guys are great, man. Super knowledgeable, really nice guys, really good. I think there's something really special about the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition. I think it's very soft. It's very community focused. They do a good job of training their monastics. There's actually a Pure Land temple here in Pensacola. It's in the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, and I actually go. It's closed right now. Well, not closed. It's closed to the public right now because of the pandemic. Once the Delta variant thing kicked back up, they're like, okay, we can't do this right now. So I haven't been in a while, but normally they have open meditation there, and I go sit with them. The nuns are. And
I think with some of the Pure Land, you get a little bit of a mix.
Yeah.
You have some people who that all they do is, they do the Namo Ayida Phag Namo. It's like their whole practice is that chant.
Right.
Which is like homage to the Buddha. That's fine. But I think what was nice about Thich Nhat Hanh, how he really changed things up in the Vietnamese Zen tradition, is he really started going back to the basics. He really integrated a lot of the Theravada tradition. The focus on the breath, the sitting meditation, going through the sutra, studying sutras from like Nagarjuna and like this sort of really special time of Buddhism, in the early, I don't know, whatever, 1st century, is that right? Or 10th century, whatever it is. They started studying all of these sort of original texts, and I think he got a bit deeper. He started developing his own practice rather than just following along the traditions, where I think which is more Buddhist than following the Buddhist religion. I think he went back and studied what are the practices, what are the philosophies, and can I create something that's unique to me and that works for me? And I think that rather than just following a religion where, being a monastic, I saw whether it was in Sri Lanka, whether it's in Burma, whether it's in Vietnam or Tibet, wherever it is, you have monastics who are just like doing the rituals, but they're not really practicing. They're not questioning themselves, questioning the way that they're responding to the world, understanding their emotional life and their mind. And that way they're just chanting, they're just following through the usual.
Yeah. Just going through the motions.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And I think Thich Nhat Hanh broke that, and I think originally they sort of kicked him out of the tradition and now of course have welcomed him back because they see the value in what he's done. I think you see this a lot. Ajahn Brahm, it's the same thing. He started ordaining nuns under the Theravada tradition. They're like, no, the nun lineage is broken or whatever. And he's like, he's all about if you're practicing according to the Buddha, like, that's what defines you as a monastic. It's not this sort of ritual of lineage.
Yeah, absolutely. It gets pretty muddy, some people muddy it. And the thing I've noticed is, when you get those people that are, just doing the chanting or they're just meditating, and they leave out like the sila part of the path, the wise, livelihood, wise action, wise speech, like it's like they're going through the motions, but they're not living, through the Dharma. And that's the big thing, it's like, okay, well, you're it's kind of like almost just putting on a show at that point. You know, if you're not really like living according to the precepts and you've taken the precepts, it's like,
yeah.
And
also,
go ahead.
I mean, also, you know, if you think about, often when I'm teaching people meditation, you know, the first couple of weeks, they come back, you know, after I teach them the first week of practice, and I say, hey, take this meditation, go practice it throughout this week. And they come back, usually the first week, the conversation is about why were they not able to actually sit down and meditate? And what people realize is what you have to do, how you have to change your life in order to create space for you to sit in meditation is just as powerful as actually sitting in the meditation itself. Mm-hmm. So like you have to arrange your relationships in a way in which it's okay that you take space. You have to have a livelihood that doesn't take up all of your time every day and totally wear you out so you can't meditate or, you know, give you flashbacks during the, you know, your meditation. Right. You have to, you know, take care of your body enough so you sleep well, so you don't have like substances in you, so you can actually sit for the meditation. Yeah. So you have to arrange your whole life in this way so you can even sit down. And for me, that's sila. You're creating appropriate boundaries for yourself. Whatever your picture of well-being is, that's fine. But, you know, you don't have to gain full enlightenment or whatever. You just want to have a little bit more peace of mind in your day. But arranging your life, putting appropriate boundaries for yourself that move you in this sort of wholesome direction, that's sila. You know, that's ultimately creating space for yourself to sit and have a good experience. Man,
that's awesome. That's an excellent perspective, and I've never heard it put that way, but I love that. I love that view of sila. That's really fantastic, and I think that anybody that is listening to this can gain a lot from that. Yeah, it's just about the way you arrange your life. Yeah, and because that would literally take care of every factor of the sila aspect of the path.
Right. I mean, yeah, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right mindfulness, right. You know, all of those pieces are just about arranging your life so you can sit in meditation.
Yeah. Yeah. I have never even looked at, that's an interesting perspective that I've never even considered. And I appreciate that, man.
Sure. I mean, it's all very functional.
Yeah.
That's what I liked about Buddhism in general. And also things like don't steal, not because it's like bad, or don't kill somebody. Again, not because it's bad, but because if you steal something and then you try to go sit in meditation, you're going to be worrying about getting caught the entire time.
Yeah, exactly. I tell people that all the time. I was like, yeah, that is there. You know, those precepts or those, you know, rules exist pretty much for that, because like all the negative shit that you do, that's the stuff that's going to come up immediately when you're sitting, and it's going to be like, it's going to make it an incredibly rough process.
Yeah, I can't believe I said that to them. Yeah. Oh man, now it's going to come back to me. It's going to bite me in the ass.
Right.
Oh, what if I get caught? Like what, you know, it's like all of that stuff comes up.
Yeah.
It makes it impossible for you to sit. And for me, ultimately, that's about integrity too.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. If the sila is about maintaining your integrity. And that's about what you believe to be the right action and right way to live in your life, not what somebody else believes.
Right.
And of course, we adopt other people's perspectives because we're herd animals. We start looking at ourselves and judging ourselves in the same way that our herd, whatever we perceive our herd to be,
right. Yeah.
Does. But like, you know, I think maintaining your integrity, keeping sila is what actually allows you to have peace of mind. And eventually that culminates in concentration. Right. And some deep insight, which is why we practice in the first place for insight, for understanding, which brings peace of mind for the long term.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. I love that you have gone into psychology too, because Buddhism and psychology are so hand in hand. Mm-hmm. Really. You know, if you get right down to it, there's an entire book on Buddhist psychology.
There's several books on Buddhist psychology. But, you know, I think also a lot of psychologists become a psychologist first. They understand the mind from this Western perspective, psychology from the Western perspective, and then they do like a little foray into mindfulness or meditation, or, you know, maybe more substantial, of course. But the perspective is that mindfulness is like a piece of psychology.
Right.
For me, I went in first into meditation, mindfulness, and understood the world, the mind, from the perspective of Buddhism and from meditation, contemplative tradition. And then I went into psychotherapy afterwards. So for me, psychotherapy is like skillful means to help people get deeper in meditation. Like, I think there's a lot of great psychotherapy. There's a lot of fantastic approaches to psychotherapy that are incredibly helpful to people and also are more targeted to specific like anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, PTSD, whatever. And that's great. These interventions are built. But for me, that sits within the larger picture of meditation. And the way that I define meditation is about training your mind to move towards well-being. That's meditation for me.
Yeah.
So psychotherapy is one little piece of that, but there are all these meditation practices and other practices within that meditation field that is a wider perspective. So for me, when I'm doing psychotherapy with people, it's often to help them get into a place where they can sit in meditation and where they can move forward with a deeper understanding of themselves and the world with mindfulness-based meditation or deeper meditation practices, right, to train the mind.
Yeah, that's very similar. I have a very similar story on that one as well. I said I've had a pretty dedicated practice for about 7 years, definitely more so over the past few years than prior for obvious reasons. But I'm actually in school for psychology right now. And I get psychology, through Buddhism, not to Buddhism from psychology. So right. Very similar in that aspect. And yeah, because I immediately saw, I was like, these two things kind of work hand in hand. They're very, I can't really think of a good word for
complementary. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. That's the word I was looking. That's the exact word I was looking for. Sorry, it's very early, and it's been a shitstorm over here already this morning between cats and power outages and everything else. It's great.
And even when I was a monastic, and I was realizing all the stuff that was happening in our monastery, I needed an outside perspective. I wanted to look for an outside perspective to understand what was going on with me. Understand what was going on in the monastery, to make sure like my perspective of things was right and like this is messed up. So I went to see a therapist as a monk. So I would walk in, and here's like a mother taking her child out of the therapy office, and here's this guy walking in with like a brown robe and a shaved head, like holes burned in my head from my full ordination, and like looking at me like, yeah, he should be going to therapy. I like walk into the therapist's office, and I went for several months going to therapy, and the therapist was great. And I remember specifically one moment when he said to me, because this was all happening in German, he goes, "Bist du ein Mäuse?" He's like, "Are you a mouse?" He said in German, he's like, "Do you run around the edges of the monastery but afraid to walk through the center to confront what's really happening?" I was like, "Oh my God. He's so right." Because for me at that time, I was a monk and I'm like, I should be peaceful and I should be accepting and I should be thoughtful and compassionate about everybody's different perspective.
Right.
When in fact, I needed to stand up for myself. I needed to confront the situation. I needed to take action.
Yeah.
Right. And I was so scared to, and I didn't realize it. So his encouragement from this more Western perspective of like, take care of yourself, fight back,
right.
Yeah. I needed that integration internally. And that's what gave me the courage to sort of stand up to the teacher and say, this is not okay, and confront it. And, that was a huge, huge help for me. So that for me, the integration healed me, brought me out of a place of suffering. And so when I think about that for other people, and you think about the Four Noble Truths, like one, not like there is suffering in the world. One is there's suffering in your life.
Right. Yeah.
Number two, you're doing something to add or to incite this suffering, right? I was staying in this position. I was avoiding conflict, right? So, and there's a different way third noble truth, there's a path. There's a different way to respond to the situation. There's something you can actually do. And then there's the path to walk that path to actually do something. So like that, going to the therapist really helped me to walk that path. And then confront the situation, move through it, make the choices according to my integrity, and get in a place where I could get back to meditating with a peace of mind.
Yeah.
So I think helping other people to do the same and integrate those pieces is my life mission, and sort of sharing that with as many people as possible.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, yeah. One of my teachers always says something that's kind of similar along those lines. He's like, just because we're Buddhist doesn't mean we have to be Buddhist doormats. He's like, soft heart, strong back. Soft heart, strong back. Okay. And that stuck with me. It's like, yeah, man. So yeah. That's so funny though. He called you out almost immediately. He's like, yeah, you're just avoiding the situation. And you're like, yeah, I am doing that. Oh man. I hate when that happens. Yeah. I hate when I have those massive realizations like that, when somebody points out something that's so blatantly obvious. Once you actually like take it into consideration, you're like, oh, I can't believe I've been doing that this whole time.
Right. There's one good thing about being a therapist too, because a lot of the times it's not anything special about the therapist.
Right.
It's just you just haven't said this stuff out loud to anybody. Finally, when you say it out loud, it's like so obvious. And the therapist is like, do you think you should do something about that? And you're like, ah.
Yeah, probably should. Probably should do something about that. So, man, one thing it just kind of popped in my head just now is like, we were talking about your Zen teacher and just his unsavory practices at the time.
Yeah.
And that seems to be kind of a problem in Buddhism. That's not just in Buddhism, but I think just in religion in general. Anybody that's given a position of power like that, like not anybody, but a lot of the time it seems that a lot of people that are in that position seem to use it for unsavory things. They manipulate their position of power, and man, that's so gross. It's so gross to me.
Yeah.
It is. It's just so gross.
Yeah. And I think, in that situation, there's something my father used to, or still, says. He would say, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Right. Which is, I forget who said that originally, but, I think you find in this situation, and you have a lot of these monastics who, they've never been a layperson.
Right.
My first teacher, he ordained as a monk when he was like 7. In Vietnam, and then the Vietnam War happened, and then he came over to Europe with his teacher, and he stayed in the monastery there, and who knows what was happening to him and what experience that he had. Because I racked my brain forever to figure out what would make somebody do this? Why would you do this? You have all these amazing resources available to you, and I think a big part, he just didn't want to be a monk anymore, but he was trapped. He was trapped in this situation. He had never experienced what it was like to be with somebody and have a relationship with somebody. Just to be somebody who didn't have all this pressure on him to lead a spiritual community.
Yeah. Yeah.
And part of me feels bad for him. One part of me is you horrible person. How could you ever do this terrible stuff to people who trusted you?
You have to have compassion for the situation though. Yeah.
Yeah. The other part of me is the poor guy, he felt totally trapped in his situation, and he tried to figure it out. He did a poor job trying to figure it out. And he couldn't actually be honest with how he felt and what he wanted in his life. And so, but I don't think anybody needs to be a terrible person.
No, I don't think there's any ill intent behind it, to begin with, or probably not at all. And like you said, he's just a man, we put them on these pedestals, but at the end of the day, we're all just the same people.
Seriously.
Yeah. We all have, we all have desires, and we all have cravings, and
right. And if he was just a regular guy,
right,
and he's having, sex with whoever, fine.
Yeah, sure.
But The problem is when you say you're a monk,
Yeah.
you're a celibate monk, now you're not living with integrity,
Yes.
right? Now you're lying to people. You're saying that you're something that you're not, and that's not okay. And when you're in a position of power and you're using that power to, misuse people underneath you, whatever that is, whether it's in a company, whether you're a director of a film or whatever it is, a spiritual teacher, then that's when it gets messy.
Right.
But if you are honest with yourself about what you want in the world and what your picture of well-being is, and you tell people, you're transparent about it, and great, good for you, man. Like, go for it. But when you're lying about it, that's a mess. It just creates, whether it's, there's plenty of people I know that you're probably familiar with, different people in different communities that have, utilized their position of power. Even Sogyal Rinpoche, man, he was great. He gave great teachings. He's an amazing teacher. He had a big center in Ireland or whatever. But again, he was sleeping with his students as well. Like lots of Tibetan teachers did that, and all sorts of. And it happens in different religious traditions as well. And I think in Buddhism specifically, one teacher said to me is, if you're not meditating, if you're not really continuing to practice yourself, that energy of wanting to connect with somebody and get the satisfaction from that, sexual encounter, that's just going to overcome. It's going to overcome you. You can't be a celibate monastic and not be, practicing diligently in that way, because you're going to get lost.
Right. That makes sense. That does make sense. Yeah. Yeah. You get put in these positions of power, and, I think that's the human condition, right? We want things, and a lot of time it is sex, a lot of times it is, because that is the most base of our human desires, is the desire to procreate. It's deeply installed within us. And, to be a monastic, I can't even imagine how hard it is to fight that urge,
Yeah, I mean,
I've never been a monastic.
Especially,
I've only been a lay person. So
yeah, I mean, at the beginning, it's much harder. But once you get going, like I was celibate in my 20s.
Right.
For like 7 years, I was celibate. And once you get going, it's a lot easier. And if you're practicing, and you have a community that's also in that way, the desire fades a bit.
Okay.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I remember I was actually I was in the airport in Frankfurt, and this like famous talk show host saw me and she was like there with all of her cameras, and it was like this teeny bopper sort of TV show, and she's like got fake this, fake fake everything, blonde hair. And she like came up to me and she's like speaking to me in German. She's like, "What are you for a person?" They ask, "Was bist du für ein Mensch?" which means, "What are you for a person?" And then starts talking to me about being a monastic. And she's like, she said something like, "Oh, are you not attracted to women?" And I said, "Well, I mean, I am attracted to women." She's like, "Am I attractive?" And I she wanted me to be honest. And I was like, when you see somebody close up who's had everything done, I was about to tell her what I really thought. She's like, no, don't say anything. Because you get, once sex is out of the picture,
right,
then you're really connecting with somebody.
Yeah.
That magical, mystical, like, I'm just going to forget about that other stuff so we can have sex right now. That goes out the window, and you're really connecting with somebody, and the faults are there.
Yeah.
You're not afraid to say them,
because past everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. Like a lot of times you don't tell somebody how you're really feeling or what you really think, because you want to keep it a secret just long enough to have sex.
There's an ultimate goal at the end. Yeah.
Right. So there's this built-in sort of dishonesty.
Yeah.
Like
an installed deception already. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like living in a fantasy, like you think this person is one person. You're really falling in love with that person in your mind, right? If you think that person is in your mind, you're lying to yourself or they're lying to each other, whatever it happens to be.
Right.
And then eventually, after 3 months of dating or something, the honeymoon phase is over. Then you start seeing who this person actually is, right?
Right.
So I had another similar situation, and I was a monk, and this woman came to the monastery from Mexico. She lived in Mexico. She had met this guy who was in our monastery, who actually had come to the monastery to get off his psychotic medication, right? His medication for his psychosis. And the last time I had seen him, he was roller skating through the dining hall, saying the CIA was after him with helicopters.
Oh, wow.
That was the last time I had seen him. And she tells me, so I'm at the monastery, I'm helping the teacher with like acupuncture needles, and he says, "Oh, your karma is waiting for you in the Buddha hall." So I go downstairs into the Buddha hall, and there's this gorgeous woman laying on the floor in a sundress. And I immediately closed the doors. I went back upstairs. I said, "Nope, that is not my karma." He said, "No, that is. She's here for you." And I said, "Okay." So I went down, started talking with her. And apparently this guy who had been getting off of psychotic medication had met her in India and told her she needed to travel to Germany to meet me because I would help her break through her problem. And so this woman then, in our conversation, her brother had passed away. And apparently he had killed himself. And he had left a note for her. But she didn't tell the rest of her family. And she didn't tell me any of this as well. She said, "I want you to help me." And I was like, "Okay, how can I help you?" And then she tried to sort of seduce me into telling her what she wanted to hear. And I felt this pull, I was like, "Oh wow, this is why you get stuck in your life. Is because you seduce people to tell you what you want to hear." And she's very persuasive, right? But as a monastic, I was like, I'm not interested in a relationship. You don't have anything to offer me in that sense.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a connection, and if I can help you, I'm happy to help you. And man, she got so angry. She started screaming at me. She's literally pulling her hair out of her head. And then I was like, "I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name." And she's screaming at me because I wouldn't tell her what she wanted to say, "No, you don't have to tell them." I kept saying "No, you feel like you have to tell them." And she's like, "You're not telling me, what I want to hear." Pulling her hair out. And I said, "Oh, I forgot your name. What was your name?" And she goes, "Ugh." And then she stormed out of the building. The next day she came back, she apologized, and she told me that, yes, this is sort of her pattern that came out of her mouth, that she's just been avoiding confronting the situation. And I feel like, and it was this healing experience for her. And I feel like if I hadn't been a monk, I would have been interested in connecting with her, having a relationship with her in some way. Right. And where sex would have gotten in between her and me. Right. I wouldn't have been able to be a good person in that situation and hold the space. She wouldn't have been able to see the truth that she was really, really seeking. Yeah. I think there is a place for celibacy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. That's a crazy story, man. Oh. Yeah. Oh, wow. That had to have been a lot to handle. A very irate Mexican woman screaming at you.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. And there's pictures, there's Vietnamese women chopping vegetables all around us. This is happening, watching it like it's a TV show. I mean, it was pretty wild. And I'm not exaggerating it whatsoever. It was
that's funny. That's really good. So how long, you said you were a monastic for what, 7 years?
6. Yeah.
6. Okay. And how old were you when you decided to leave the,
About 28.
About 28.
I decided to leave. And, I was in Burma. I was in a retreat in Burma, and at Paok Monastery. I'd been there for 4 or 5 months, and I was, I had this what I think is one of my deepest realizations, and I think I mean, I did my fair share of deep retreat. And I hear a lot of other teachers give these accounts of this like profound experience of enlightenment and change in their perception of self and like all of that sort of stuff. And, that's great. But for me, in my practice and how I've experienced things, it's been very gradual. There's not like these big flashes of insight.
Yeah.
But for me, the most powerful things, and although I guess I have had some flashes, but they're actually not the most important things that I've experienced. For me, it was this moment of realizing, just sitting in meditation and realizing I'm becoming a different person. As I practice regularly, it's changing my mind. I am a different person than I used to be. I feel healthier, I feel clearer, I think about things differently. And as I realized that, I realized, oh my God, like I've found the way to change, to become the person that you want to be.
Right. Yeah.
You just have to be steady, and you have to have a clear path, and you have to keep on it. And with that realization, I realized I looked at all my friends, my family, and like, what were they spending their time in the day doing? And although they have wholesome jobs, they do good things, they have family, they have friends, they're not bad people whatsoever. They're great people. But they weren't spending 10 or 14 hours a day meditating, right? Really focused on training their mind. And I was like, with that realization, I was like, how do I share what I've learned with these people? The people that I really care about. And so I was like, okay, well, there's certain things that we probably could do. I could create, a training program. I could create a process that people could go through to realize some of these things. And that's what I eventually did. But in that realization, I also realized like to do that, I feel like I have to actually take the robes off and go back to school and create a life for myself that's outside of being a monk. And along with that, I realized that I want to have a family at some point in my life. I want to have that experience. And so here I am as a monk in a retreat in the forest, in Burma, in deep retreat, with my great realization is that I want to take my robes off.
Oh, wow.
And that's what would keep my integrity.
Hey.
And so, it took me a year and a half before I actually took the robes off. I came back and started taking classes at Harvard Extension School in the US. I lived at the Cambridge Zen Center in Cambridge, Massachusetts, while I was taking classes to prepare to go back to school. And then and the Zen Center was like sort of my monk halfway house. I transitioned from being a monk to a layperson there, and started dating again. And,
monk halfway.
And then went back to school.
That's fun. So how was it integrating back in to being a lay person from being a monk? How'd that process go? Was it probably pretty easy? I would imagine probably easier than transitioning to being a monk.
Yes, definitely much easier. I came back with like some tools that I didn't have. When I first started dating again, I was much more confident because I knew I was fine by myself. I knew I'd be okay.
Yeah.
And so I was like, and I can deal with rejection. So I'm just going to give everything to it, try to see if it works, with the understanding that it might not work.
Yeah.
And that, that felt good. I think, being celibate for 7 years throughout your 20s, sort of you miss some development there.
Yeah.
In terms of like having relationships and dating, like what are the norms, that my wife makes fun of me that I had to be re-educated in a lot of ways. But that was an interesting transition, but I was much more open. I was much more present. I was concentrated. Before I became a monk, I was a terrible student in school.
Right.
The only reason I got through college is because I was an actor, and most of my classes were like voice class or like dance class or Shakespeare,
Yeah.
But when I came back from being a monk, my concentration was like better than anybody I interacted with. I had ADD. I was diagnosed with ADD as a kid, and now I could sit and pay attention to my breath for 3 hours nonstop.
Yeah.
So when they were like, "Oh, you're going to have to write these long papers and whatever," I was like, "All right, whatever." I sat in a hut for 5 months. It's like I can sit and write a paper. So that was, and of course there's a lot of other stuff to learn, but that the transition back, it was definitely a lot easier.
Yeah. That's interesting. I noticed that because I just got back into school not that long ago, and previously my earlier attempts at school and my earlier scholastic career, I was not the best student. I was also diagnosed ADHD when I was younger. Yeah. And then now I make straight A's. It's like I just it's like it's so weird. But yeah, it does. It just changes the way you think, man. It just changes your brain. It changes your mind. Yeah. And quite literally. Absolutely for the better too. And that's why I tell people all the time, they're like, well, because I for some reason people always ask me for advice or consistently like, hey, what should I do? I'm like, get a dedicated practice. Get a dedicated meditation practice. Like you will start reaping the rewards almost immediately. And you just don't know how profoundly life-changing it can be, Right. Yeah.
And it's not that hard. I mean, like comparatively to like all the crap we put ourselves through and the suffering that we endure. Yeah. Like meditation is really not that hard. No. And also the technique is pretty, let your body breathe and feel the sensation of the breath. I mean, that'll take you can practice that for years. Oh yeah. And probably do it as much as you can. Yeah. And that will change your life in itself. And when I say to my friends and my family, I say, please, one time in your life, for 1 month of your life, meditate an hour every day, and it will change your perception of what is possible, what your mind is possible of, what your mind is capable of. Yeah. And that is, I say it to all my friends and family, because when I finally started meditating, I realized there's this tremendous amount of opportunity that I never knew was there. Mm-hmm. And that actually, I didn't have the capacity to recognize. And when you start meditating enough, you actually gain an amount of choice in your life that you didn't know was there, because the muscle actually gets strong enough to actually choose to respond to things in a different way. Whereas before, you didn't actually have free will. Yeah, you just reacted. Yeah, not until you actually gain the muscle to respond differently did you gain free will. I think that's an essential piece of a spiritual practice, no matter, what tradition that you're in. Yeah. Yeah. So how long have you been doing, how long have you been running your business that you're operating now? So I've taught meditation since, pretty steadily since 2010. And before that as well, but steadily, had a study class since then. And we developed SkillfulMeans, which is my company now, in 2017. And really, we did live events before the pandemic. And then once the pandemic hit, we started developing online courses. And we, the courses really are sort of 4 pieces. One is clarify your picture of well-being. So we help you to develop sort of, what are the domains of your life that are really important to you, that need some insight that you want to develop. We help you break those down. Then we help you develop a systematic mindfulness-based meditation practice, learn a bunch of different meditations, to build the muscle, to clarify what you want, to build the capacity to act differently in your life. And then we help you apply that meditation to those areas of your life. So rather than just, being mindful while you wash the dishes, we help you be mindful when you're in that important relationship dynamic that you get yourself in, and respond differently. Absolutely. Right? To really change your life. And then we, creating a community of support for yourself. So we do these sort of 3-month intensives, and then with like a year of follow-up. So we have an online community, we have like an online forum with all sorts of resources, we have like videos, we have weekly meetings, all of those pieces to really help somebody build, learn, and integrate meditation practices. And we focus on really a couple of different audiences, the spiritual junkie, so to speak, which is a lot of people that I'm working with. We have parents and teachers. So Chris Willard teaches courses for us. We have coming out ones for creatives, and then a class for athletes. And then we have another program for people who want to change the relationship with their body. So that's integrating mindfulness specifically in those different areas. And we have different teachers who are sort of pros in different areas. And integrate those materials. Yeah.
Yeah, that's super awesome, man. That's awesome. You guys are doing a great thing. Just, man, like I said, meditation's so important, and it's just so life-changing, and it really can just alter your perspective on life. I used to be a very depressed person. I had a lot of really, really bad depression issues for many, many years. And it's really through meditation and just having that dedicated practice and that insight, to myself, like really just turning within and like really like examining all the ins and outs of my own psychology, that like I've been able to gain some sense of peace in my life, and I owe my life to meditation, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would be, where I'm at now if it wasn't for that, which, granted, I'm probably not where I want to be. There's definitely some craving and some clinging going on to, where I would like to be. But, ultimately, I'm okay, like, and it's that, it's like, I'm probably not where I want to be, but I'm okay where I'm at. And just being okay with that, and that's come from a meditation practice. It's just that being content in the present moment, just as it is, and so that's the, like I said, but like I said earlier, that's one thing I tell everybody is like, just get a dedicated practice. Like even if it's only like 30 minutes a day, if you can find 30 minutes a day, like, then you don't have
completely change your life.
How much time do you waste just scrolling on your phone? You've got 30 minutes to do nothing. Trust me. I know for a fact you got 30 minutes to do nothing. Because I see you do nothing for hours at a time.
Right. I mean, imagine if we could, if everybody was spending the same amount of time meditating as they were on social media. Right. The world would have so many other problems.
The society that we could build, just how drastically the world itself would change for the positive, It just blows me away. Yeah. I just can't recommend that to people enough. And only, through empirical knowledge do I know that, it's not like I read a book and I'm like, I read a book about it and it seems to help. It's like, no, this is boots on the ground stuff. Like I've done this. I know that this changes your life. Like I went from a homeless heroin junkie at one point to, having a podcast and a place to do it. And, and it's all through a dedicated meditation practice. That's what it's through. It's through taking that deep look at yourself and just the way that you interact, not only with the world, but with yourself, the way you talk to yourself, the things, the stories you tell yourself, the narratives that have been built in your head over the years. Like, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. That's all just bullshit. Okay. Now we've got some utility. Now we have options. Now that we know that that's not true. And these are all just stories. These are all just, Right. Yeah. It's so fun.
Yeah. I remember being again, another time I was in Burma in meditation and just sitting there and feeling depression. I'm in this beautiful place. I'm surrounded by sun is shining, perfect temperature. There's monks around, birds are chirping. There's like sea, the forest and the ocean. It's just like perfect, quote unquote. And just feeling depressed. And in that moment, I saw my mind move towards the usual response of like, stuff that down, push that away. That's a wrong way to be feeling. And I just caught myself in that moment of, oh, this is what I've been doing my whole life. Yeah. This is actually why this has been maintained. And instead, I just sort of let the feeling be there. And I just was present with feeling sad. And I just was curious about it. What is this feeling? And just in the fact of moving towards it instead of away from it, it felt like I've been treading water my whole life, treading water. And then finally I went to put my feet down and they hit the ground, and I realized I'd been only treading water in like 3 feet of water.
I could stand up this whole time.
And I stood up. Yeah, I could stand up this whole time. But I've been furiously kicking my feet, trying to get away from it. It's so dangerous. Oh my God. And then I put my feet down. I was like, oh, now I feel like an idiot.
Yeah.
But
yeah. No, it's exactly like that. It's exactly what it is. Oh man, that's too funny. Well, man, William, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today, man. It's been super fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So where can people find you at if they're interested in taking some of your courses and changing their life for the better?
Yeah. So skillfulmeans.life is our website. And also we just started a foundation, Skillful Minds Foundation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because that's for people who can't necessarily afford some of our programs, more intensive programs, but they'd like to do one, because we want to provide that availability. It's this sort of mix for me. I used to teach all my meditation classes for free, right? But to be able to build a community that's offering all the resources and that continues and that grows and connects with more people and offers like high quality products, I had to create a business and like a business model. And excuse my language, but that shit's expensive.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, to have like online programs and to like market it to people and like, do the design work and like make it look nice and high quality audio and video, like all of that, it's a lot. So we wanted to find a way where we could still offer this to people who couldn't afford it otherwise. So we started the Skillful Minds Foundation, and we focus on diverse or underserved community or whatever. So ultimately, if you feel like you're oppressed in any way, which is a lot of people, we want to offer people scholarships to our programs. And ultimately, we're furiously writing grants for that right now. So if anybody also is interested in supporting that, we'd be really psyched to have your support as well, because I think it's a meaningful thing that we're doing. I really believe in it. I think we've already helped thousands of people. Although our deeper programs are pretty new, we've had a couple hundred people go through those by the time you're probably hearing this. And I want to keep doing that. I want to keep making this more available to other people. So that's skillfulmindsfoundation.org. So you can go there if you want to give or get support to participate in some of these programs. But ultimately, you can always reach out to me. My email and information is on our website. And I'd love to hear from you.
Sweet. Excellent. Well, thanks again, man. I really, like I said, I do appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and we'll have to do this again sometime for sure.
So many thanks are in order to William, yet again, for being on the show. If you would like to get in touch with him, he can be found at skillfulmeans.life or on Facebook at Skillful Means Community. If you like the program, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. This has been Dharma Junkie. I'm Justin. Namaste.
Chaos is beautiful.